Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to this IAVE webinar on volunteering as an antidote to the epidemic of loneliness. My name is Matt Clausen. I am serving in this role of moderator today in my volunteer role as vice chair of the IAVE Board of Directors, as well as regional representative for North America and the Caribbean. I am based in Washington, D.C. myself, and I welcome all of you. We have got a great turnout today, and people are joining as I am starting here, but we're going to get ourselves going right away because we have a lot of material to cover. I would like to go over a few sort of general announcements and housekeeping rules. Many of you are IAVE members. If you are not, please, we welcome you. There's a link on the website on the webinar screen now to learn more about being an IAVE member. We value the members that we have in communities across the world. Today's session, we will have a great number of really inspiring and knowledgeable speakers talking about the topic. We have a very large number of registrants for the webinar, so thank you very much. I think this topic strikes a chord with many of us. We have the chat is open in the webinar, but if you do want to put forth a specific question for consideration during the Q&A at the end, please use the Q&A function in the webinar so that we can try and track those questions as best we can. We certainly won't be able to get to every question, but if you put the questions in the Q&A, it'll be easier to see the questions that are coming in. I'm going to talk a little bit about the run of show, and I'm going to briefly introduce all of our speakers up front so that we can then transition rather seamlessly between each of our speakers today. We are going to have 3 sets of interventions with 4 total speakers, and we will be kicked off by having Andrea Wigfield join us. She's the professor of applied social and policy research at Sheffield Hallam University, where she's the director of the Center for Loneliness Studies and the co-director of the Campaign to End Loneliness. And she's a leading research on loneliness and social isolation, specializing in the wider social determinants and implications through research, program evaluation, and evidence-based policy and practice. She's been awarded research funding of almost £13 million and has published over 50 books, chapters, articles, and reports, and worked on almost 100 externally funded research projects. And she will get us kicked off setting the stage, providing insights from her significant body of research on loneliness, including definitions and including references to how volunteering can be used as an intervention. Following Andrea, we will have 2 speakers speaking together in one sort of block of this webinar, and that will be Lejla Šehić Relić, who and Casper Danø, who will be speaking sort of back together. Lejla has been a dedicated social activist since 1993, the founder and CEO of the Organization for Social Development, the Collective, and leads the National Volunteer Development Center. Since 2019, she served as the president of the Center for European Volunteering, CEV, a network of over 60 organizations across Europe. And holding a degree in public administration and specializing in social innovation, Lejla has shaped policies and practices in Croatian and European civil society for over 2 decades. And she's co-authored several publications on volunteering and community development and was a laureate of an award for promoting peacemaking, nonviolence, and human rights in Croatia in 2020. And she'll be speaking together with Casper. And Casper is the CEO of Frise, the volunteer centers and peer groups in Denmark, and specializes in social entrepreneurship and leadership. He promotes civil society and community engagement in Denmark, leading a network supporting 70 local volunteer centers. And his role includes strategic direction, policy development, and innovative tech solutions. And he's involved in various professional affiliations and board positions, and he's worked effectively to bridge policy research and practical application within the nonprofit sector, driving meaningful community impact and fostering volunteering. Lejla and Casper will speak from the practical level about programs and each have rolled out to address loneliness through volunteering. And their remarks will include lessons learned and best practices for those who wish to set up similar programs. And then we'll conclude today's session with Asha Curran. Asha is CEO of Giving Tuesday, and she has served as chair of the board of Guardian.org, as a board member of the Resource Alliance, and as advisory committee co-chair for the Belfer Center for Innovation and Social Impact at the 92nd Street Y, where she was formerly chief innovation officer. She's a fellow at Stanford University's Center for Philanthropy and Civil Society, a Marlin Barry Beck visiting social innovator at the Social Innovation and Change Initiative at the Harvard Kennedy School, and a fellow at the Said Business School at the University of Oxford. And Asha was named to the Nonprofit Times Top 50 Power and Influence list annually, 2019 through 2024, and she was honored as Influencer of the Year. Clearly, we have an incredible set of speakers, and we will be addressing this overall topic, which I think has hit us all in different ways. And recently, as you saw in the advertisement for this session, the New York Times recently reported on skyrocketing rates of loneliness, citing in the United States that 25% of Americans are lonelier today than they were before the pandemic. And there was also a decision by the WHO to make loneliness an official global public health concern. However, the same article highlights the fact that volunteering is an overlooked cure, noting its potential to prevent and alleviate loneliness among adults. And that's what we're here today to talk about. And I want to give special thanks also to IAVE Executive Director Nicole Cirillo and her team for architecting and putting together this exciting and timely webinar. As fate may have it, Nicole is actually in the air in an airplane during the webinar, so she will be catching up with the recording, which we hope to share following the session. So I will stop speaking now and pass the floor to Andrea, who will get us kicked off.
Hi, everybody. It's really great to be here. So I'm going to just give you a brief introduction to loneliness and then link into how volunteering can help address loneliness. Bear with me, I've got a slight issue with my slides. Okay, so I'm a professor at Sheffield Hallam University, has been previously said, and I'm director of the Centre for Loneliness Studies and the co-director of the Campaign to End Loneliness. So I've been carrying out research for around 15 years on loneliness. I look to understand who's at risk of loneliness, what the implications of loneliness are, and also carry out evaluations of programmes designed to reduce loneliness. So I just want to say very briefly about our Centre for Loneliness Studies. We're an interdisciplinary centre, so we look at loneliness in a holistic way from all different disciplines, whether that's from sociology, architecture, health, business, and we like to see ourselves as a world-leading research centre on loneliness. We're very keen to involve policymakers, practitioners, and people who lived experience of loneliness in our research. And in turn, we try and make sure that our findings feed back into that sector. When we look at loneliness in our centre, we look across the life course. So we're not just looking at one particular age group, we're looking at loneliness from birth to death, really. And very briefly about the Campaign to End Loneliness, that was set up in 2011. It's a world-leading advocacy for reducing loneliness. I know that various organisations across the world have contacted us to see how our model of good practice can be transferred elsewhere. We moved the campaign to Sheffield Hallam University about a year ago. And the campaign's been really instrumental in the UK in the past in terms of it contributed to the development of the first Minister for Loneliness in the UK, and it also contributed to the publication of the UK's first loneliness strategy back in 2018. The campaign works with a number of stakeholders and people with lived experience of loneliness, so we can really make sure that the activities that we carry out link to people who are experiencing loneliness and trying to provide services for loneliness as well. I just want to mention that we've been funded recently by the Department for Culture, Media and Sport in the UK to run something called the Tackling Loneliness Hub, and the link's on there. That's a site where we have a network of over 1,000 service providers who work with people who are lonely, and we have a number of webinars and blog events. So if anyone wants to join, they're welcome to do so. Okay, so in terms of loneliness and social isolation, why are they important and how are they defined? So many of you may well already know this, but just to recap, loneliness is a subjective, unwelcome feeling where you have a loss or lack of companionship. It often happens when there's a mismatch between the types, the quantity and the quality of the relationships that you have to those that you actually want. And quite often people can feel lonely if they compare their relationships to those of their peers and feel that the relationships are weaker or poorer or of less quality than what the peers have. Social isolation, on the other hand, is more of an objective measure of the number of contacts that people have in any given period of time. And if you're socially isolated, that number will be minimal. Now, it's important to make sure that when we're talking about loneliness and social isolation, we differentiate between the two. They have similar but different health implications, and the strategies and interventions designed to reduce them will then in turn differ as well. So in terms of who's at risk of loneliness, I've identified 4 key kind of characteristics and circumstances which will heighten people's risk of loneliness. So the first is about personal characteristics. So things like age, disability, ethnicity, LGBTQI plus status. We know, for example, if we think about age, that young adults between the ages of 16 and 24 are the most group at risk of loneliness, followed by older people. Personal circumstances can also influence whether we feel lonely or not. So whether we have access to a car or the internet, if we live alone, if we have a caring responsibility, whether it's for an older person or a child. And then health conditions, they play a really important role in the extent to which we're likely to feel lonely. So long-term health conditions, but also mental health and sensory impairment as well. And then finally, something that is important, but people often overlook this, is the locality profile. So the place where we live, where we go to school, the neighbourhoods, perception of crime, all these things affect our ability to go out and engage in meaningful interaction with other people and connect to the places and spaces where we live. And the second group of people who are at risk of loneliness are those who are experiencing transitory life events. So these can occur at any point to any of us throughout our lives. So I've put some examples on there. Bereavement, children leaving home, the so-called empty nest syndrome, becoming a carer or ceasing to become a carer, a change in relationship, for example, divorce or separation, could be moving home, migrating, redundancy. All these kinds of transitory life events can lead to a temporary loneliness. Now, I think the important thing to note is that loneliness is a normal part of being human. I always try and liken it to being thirsty or being hungry. So if we're thirsty, we get a signal that means we need to drink. In the same way, if we don't feel we have enough social connections or the right kind of social connections, we get a signal saying that we're lonely, and that means we need to reach out to other people. The issue is that at these transitory life events and this temporary loneliness, if that stays for a long period of time or it's experienced often on a regular basis, then it can become chronic loneliness. And chronic loneliness is a thing that can be damaging for health. both mental health and physical health. So this leads us on to why does chronic loneliness matter? So it has mental health implications. So there's evidence that it can lead to things like greater risk of depression, anxiety, cognitive decline, and general psychological well-being. In terms of physical health, you'll have all seen the reports around it possibly being equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So there is a higher risk of premature mortality. There is also risk of other health conditions like cardiovascular disease specifically. Bear with me because my slides are not working so well at the moment. Okay, there are also a knock-on effect of the mental and physical health conditions, which have a knock-on effect in terms of cost implications for primary healthcare and social care. So we know, for example, that people who feel lonely are more likely to visit the GP, they're more likely to use medication. And then finally, there are implications in terms of the wider economy. There's lost productivity. So there are reports around the estimated lost value to employers of being equivalent to 154 billion US dollars each year, and that's due to labour turnover and absenteeism. So I'm just going to move on to one of the important ways that we see loneliness in the Centre for Loneliness Studies is around meaningful relationships. Now, I see meaningful relationships fitting in terms of the loneliness debate, in terms of with other people, with oneself, and with places and spaces. So we know that to avoid being lonely, it's important to have a meaningful relationship with other people. But if those relationships lack, then you can start seeing yourself in a negative way and seeing other people's view towards you negatively. So you might avoid eye contact, for example, in the street. And that's when the relationship that you have with yourself tends to decline. And finally, meaningful relationships with places. It's important to have that sense of belonging to the environment where you live. And we know, for example, that if you have a strong sense of connection to the places and spaces where you live, where you go to school, where you work, you can actually feel comfortable being in those places alone. So when we look at meaningful relationships and loneliness, it's not just around connections with other, but it's connections with yourself and places as well. If you want any more information, I've just put in there the link to my book, Loneliness for Dummies, which talks about these three elements in more detail. Now, I don't think I've got very long left, but I just want to tell you briefly about, if you look at the WHO database, I've put the link on there, it's got a link to different kinds of interventions that can help with loneliness. So I've put one in there which helps with connecting with oneself, which is around mindfulness. And we've seen that this can help with young adults, especially in terms of managing the feelings of loneliness. I've then put some examples here from the WHO database about connecting with other people. So there's a good one there, Artisan, which is an intergenerational project which brings young people and older people together in museums through art-based activities. And then finally, connecting to places. There aren't really that many sort of rigorous evaluations of this because it's quite difficult, but some of the co-housing where you've got individual housing, intergenerationally based, and then communal spaces for people to interact seem like they may have positive implications for reducing loneliness. And then just very finally, to lead on to the speakers, I wanted to just mention quickly about the role of volunteering in reducing loneliness. I think volunteering is really important and it can help in a number of ways. And often a lot of the interventions that we've looked at have volunteering as part of their services or activities. So volunteering can be really important in terms of helping people connect with like-minded others, which can then lead to those meaningful relationships with other people. It can provide new social skills, and that can help the volunteer by boosting the communication and confidence. It can help especially around connecting with other groups of people that you might not normally come into contact with. So that could be intergenerational, but it could also link you to people who live in different locations, different ethnic groups, different groups of religion and belief, for example. It can also provide you with a sense of purpose. And I think that it's important that loneliness is not just seen as connecting with other people, but it's also connecting with yourself, as I said. So if you have a sense of purpose, it can boost your self-esteem. And then finally, it can create a sense of belonging. So that's my quick whirlwind of all my life's research on loneliness in 15 minutes. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you. And I'm happy to take questions later on.
Incredibly concise and incredibly useful. Thank you, Andrea. And as people have been putting in resources and comments and questions in the chat, if you did have questions for Andrea that we will be able to turn to at the end of all of the speakers, please don't hesitate to click on the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screens and type in a question there so that we can see it. And again, when we have the ability to share the recording from this webinar, you'll be able to spend a little more time looking at those links and resources that Andrea shared during her presentation. So thank you very, very much. And to keep us moving swiftly, I'm going to pass the floor to Casper and Lejla to take away the next section of the webinar.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you for the invitation and for opening this important conversation. I think we are very grateful, me and my colleague Casper, for this opportunity to present our collaborative work in the past years and on this topic a little bit wider. We actually began this journey as a consortium of 6 European organizations that were coming from Ireland, Slovenia, Germany, Denmark, Croatia, together with our network, European Network for Volunteering, CEV. And somehow we started 8 years ago, really talking about the transformative power of volunteering. At first, our focus was broad, and we wanted to explore how volunteering can foster social inclusion, particularly for those who often felt left on the margins of the community. But as we listened, learned, and exchanged practices across countries, one issue kept emerging, and that was loneliness. It became clear that loneliness, especially among young people, it's not just a personal feeling, but a growing societal challenge. That's when we knew we needed to look more deeply into how volunteering could offer not just inclusion, but also connection, belonging, and in many cases, healing. Across Europe, we are witnessing a sharp rise of loneliness. More and more people are quietly struggling. The weight of social expectations, inequality, digital overload, repeated crises from the pandemic to growing insecurity, they all have taken a toll. Feelings of anxiety, disconnection, and isolation are becoming far too common. In this context, we believe volunteering holds an important potential, and it can be a bridge from isolation to inclusion, from disconnection to belonging. We see every day how volunteering provides not only support, but also companionship, connection, and care. It has a potential to create genuine human interaction that fosters empathy and resilience, and it empowers people to rediscover purpose and meaning in their lives. As part of our Erasmus project that we carefully designed, that was called Stop Loneliness, Start Volunteering, for the past few years, we explored how youth volunteering can address loneliness in both directions. Young people offering support to others, and volunteering itself helping young people overcome their own sense of isolation. We found that volunteering brings measurable benefits, improved well-being, increased self-confidence, and the expansion of social networks. But perhaps even more importantly, it creates community-based safety nets, trusted, informal spaces that completed families and institutions. These networks are especially important for reaching those who might otherwise fall through the cracks. We identified innovative programs across Europe, from peer support groups and social cafes to music, art, and outdoor activities, where volunteers played a central role. Volunteering-based social prescribing is also gaining attraction in Europe, with healthcare professionals referring young people to activities like gardening, creative workshops, animal care, climate action, all other different social activities in the community. These offer not just distraction, but real healing and reconnecting. At the same time, however, we must recognize that there is no EU-wide strategy to combat loneliness, and volunteering is still too often seen as a side activity rather than a strategic tool. Our research found that although 60 to 70% of organizations recognize the mental health benefits of volunteering, many face barriers: lack of funding, lack of skills to support isolated youth, or insufficient public policy backing. While countries like Denmark and some other good examples like Spain or Ireland are taking steps through national or local strategies, many others still lack the frameworks and investment needed to scale up this work. The role of civil society has been essential, but it cannot stand alone. That's why we are advocating for stronger inclusion of volunteering in EU and national policies on mental health and well-being. We believe that volunteering should be strategically embedded in youth policies, health strategies, and funding frameworks. However, for this potential to be fully realized, targeted policies and investments are needed. And based on our findings, we put forward several key recommendations. Among them, as I said, volunteering should be integrated into national and EU mental health strategies. Local governments and institutions should work with civil society to design accessible, inclusive volunteer opportunities. Volunteer involving organizations must be supported to develop tailored programs that consider loneliness not just as an individual condition, but as a collective change requiring community-based response. Formal recognition of volunteering as a meaningful form of participation of all ages, alongside education and employment, can boost both engagement and its long-term impact on well-being. And I would like to emphasize that these are not just an abstract ideas. They are rooted into real needs and successful practice across Europe. And we believe that volunteering must be seen not only as a response to loneliness, but as a part of a broader infrastructure of care and social connection that our modern society urgently needs. And let me close with this thought that volunteering has the potential to be one of the rare spaces where trust is nurtured through shared experience and mutual care. It holds the promise of being a plural space of civility and compassion, one that shields us from growing disconnection and social fragmentation. Because when societies stop connecting, they start becoming lonely, and loneliness left unaddressed eats away the very fabric of our communities. I hope that you can connect this with many other practices in your countries in the piece of world where you are living and working. Now I am pleased to hand over to my colleague Casper, that has a really good opportunity to present one of the best European examples of addressing loneliness, and that is a Danish example.
Thank you, Lejla. Hello, everyone. My name is Casper Danø, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today about one of the most pressing issues of our time, loneliness. And as Lejla said, we have been together with 6 countries in a Erasmus project, and I would like to introduce you to one of the methods or tools that we've been developing in this project. And basically, it's a bridge building model, knowing that human beings are social, that we all need to be seen and valued and feeling useful. we believe, like all of you, I think, that community involvement, and especially through volunteering, can make a powerful difference. Why? As we heard from the speakers before, that because, like, you know, volunteering gives people a reason to leave the house, or give them a meaningful role, a sense of belonging, networks, etc. But what we have a special focus on is the people that, you know, feel excluded or that vulnerable, where you can say that joining a group isn't just enough. It's not always easy for everyone to become part of a community, and some may struggle to reach out and take the first step. Around 20% of the Danish population, due to surveys, feel greater or smaller life challenges that make it difficult for them to engage in communities. And we know from similar services that about 470,000 adults in Denmark are feeling severely lonely, one may say chronically lonely, and that's about 5% of the Danish population. And these people, they have barriers to participate in communities. We heard some of the barriers before, like physical disabilities, chronic illness, mental health issues, cultural and language barriers, social challenges like, you know, financial strain or lack of transport, social and emotional challenges, etc., etc. And we cannot remove these barriers, but we can lower them. We can lower them, and we believe that we can make the journey towards a community easier by building bridges, by building, you know, intentional supportive pathways between isolated individuals and the communities around them. Now I just have to share my screen. Okay. Here I'll show you the model that we've been developing in Denmark in our organization. And this is basically a structured approach for connecting isolated people to communities. And it offers like a step-by-step approach to support individuals who face barriers in becoming a part of a community. And it helps to identify and guide and connect people, especially those who are feeling vulnerable or socially isolated, to meaningful relationships and activities. The model is built from 4 boxes, and if we start to the left, you have like the box 1, which is called knowledge. Basically, this is about making opportunities for people visible. And in this phase of the step-by-step approach, you need a mediator. And in Denmark, since like Friese work with volunteer centers, in this model, the volunteer centers act as mediators. Because before people can join a community, they need to know what's out there. And volunteer centers can, it's in their DNA, especially in Denmark, create these clear, updated overviews of local opportunities. A broad range of offers from civil society, sports, nature, culture, public service, etc. And the volunteer center has a role and responsibility to ensure the overview is visible and accessible to citizens, staff, and potential partners. In a Danish context, we use a digital tool called the Social Compass, which I can introduce to you in another webinar. In box 2, you have the fellowship, the path to community. This is the heart of the model. And in the heart of the model lies a personal, trust-building conversation, typically held at the volunteer center. Held by what I think the most equivalent translation would be a link worker. In Danish, we will call it like a community guide. The community guide or the link worker is a staff member or a trained volunteer, which role is to listen and help explore interest and barriers and the strengths of the citizens, and afterwards matching these persons with a suitable community. But it always also includes a support role with practical help. In this model, the link worker often is the one who connects and contacts the community, explain what to expect, and also a lot of time accompany the person to the first or to the second visit, which we call like the personal fellowship. In box 3, you have like the hosting, the safe welcome. What happens when the person arrives? When the person arrives, you need a good host, a host who can welcome the people, introduce the people to the other, explain the activities and expectations, and also the host is the one who checks in over time. This is about building trust, so the person feels safe to be themselves and actually have the opportunity gradually to settle in. And we know that even small gestures in volunteering communities, like remembering their name, can foster this sense of belonging. The fourth box is inclusion, like from joining to belonging. Here you have the final goal. The final goal is not just to help someone to join a group, but is to ensure that they feel that they belong. And inclusion means that you're being valued and you're an equal part of the community with an equal opportunity to contribute and form relationships. This involves that you have a responsibility to make space for different roles so that the people can both be participants, users, and volunteers. You have to allow what we say different levels of commitment, and you have to be able to listen and adapt to individual needs. You have to have flexible or low pressure. Sometimes you have to need to develop low pressure tasks and have slow start options and rooms for various degree of participation, depending on the day's mood or energy level. Around our model, you have different roles that make this work. You have guides. This is the people that through conversation help citizens to find motivation, gain clarity, and connect them with the community that suits them best, and also follow up to ensure that they get off with a good start. You have advisors. These people, you find them in volunteer centers, who helps communities and associations to become inclusive and welcoming. They guide hosts and volunteers, then offer them tools and training and help them identify barriers. And they ensure that the environment is safe and flexible. And you have referrers. I think Lejla talked about social prescribing. The referrers are the people, someone that are in regular contact with individuals who feel isolated, people who can benefit. It could be relatives, health professionals, doctors, preachers, social workers, teachers, hairdressers, etc. Their role is to recognize need and refer to volunteer centers or link workers. And the host, finally, is the person who welcomes and supports new participants in the community to ensure a warm reception, clear introduction, and ongoing support. Right now, Friese has been implementing this model across 10 Danish municipalities in collaboration with local partners. So we're testing this, maybe for you, a very abstract model in practice. And all these models, all these 10 like local projects working with this model are funded by either private foundations or public grants. Because in order to ensure quality and continuity, it is essential that you have to be that you can allocate funding, especially to the link worker role, as this is the core coordinating and guiding body. All the other roles in this model, such as referrers, hosts, and advisors, are more often carried out by volunteers, or existing inclusive actors. And this model of like this mix of paid coordination, and volunteer-driven inclusion ensures both like sustainability and local ownership. We're now beginning to see promising results, all 10 places actually. And all these local implementations are being professionally evaluated, which can generate insights to both impact and best practice, which will help us to refine the model and build evidence for more inclusive, sustainable communities. This presentation only like offer just a glimpse of our bridging model roles and phases, but if you would like to explore more, we made a guide in English, and I think it's already in the chat, or it'll be sent to you afterwards. A guide like bridging the gap to communities, and in this guide you can find like your methods for each phase, examples, role descriptions, tools for inclusion, motivation, and collaboration. I think that was it. Thank you very much for listening.
Casper, thank you. Lejla, thank you very much for these valuable experiences and models that we can all look at as adapting as appropriate to our respective environments. We've come to welcome our final and fourth speaker, Asha Curran, who will speak to the connection between volunteering and generosity, and how the simple act of giving bridges gaps in isolation and disconnecting. And then we will have a chance to turn to your growing list of questions in the Q&A tab of the webinar. Please continue adding questions there. And as my colleague Jessica has noted in the chat, the slides and the recording of this webinar will be shared in a follow-up email acknowledging your attendance. And we're 200 people strong here, so we've got a very, very diverse set of geographic and practitioners participating. So very excited, and I'll pass the floor to Asha to continue.
Thank you so much, Matt. I think I need Casper to stop sharing his screen. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be with you today. I have learned so much on this webinar already myself, and I'm delighted to share some thoughts from a Giving Tuesday perspective. So give me just 1 second. Okay. Does somebody shout or give me a thumbs down or something if that looks like it is seem fine, Matt?
Looking good.
Excellent. Okay, so hi, everybody. I'm Asha. I'm really delighted to be here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about this subject from a Giving Tuesday perspective. And for those who are not familiar with Giving Tuesday, we are both a nonprofit organization, and we are also a global generosity movement. So we are a community of people in 107 countries as of today, who are all growing cultures of giving in our regions. And we are also a very interconnected network of people who see ourselves really as working toward a shared mission and vision, even though we're all doing that in our own completely unique and authentic ways. So right now, Giving Tuesday is 13 years old. We've seen a lot of societal changes, big global upheavals. But right now, I think we've found ourselves in a particularly remarkable moment of contradiction, right? A time when technology connects us to people more quickly and more easily than ever before. And yet somehow so many of us have never felt more alone. And we can instantly find out about the daily lives of people who are thousands of miles away from us, but we don't know anything about our neighbor. So the loneliness epidemic is growing. It's growing in many, many, many places around the world. And I think it's really time for a very intentional effort, or it won't get any better. And this, the disconnection, the isolation, the loneliness, the social isolation, really interesting to learn about the difference between those two things. This is a measurable horrible reality that affects our not just our individual well-being, but our collective well-being. The good news, though, is that there is a solution, and it is a solution that is available to everyone, and that solution is giving and generosity. And that's a truth that is really, really hopeful. So we know that what is lacking is connection and community, and those are the most powerful antidotes to loneliness and to isolation. Community is not just something that's nice to have. It's the solid ground beneath our feet. It's our initial and real safety net. It's our comfort. It's our fundamental way of understanding ourselves and others. So how do we build a community connection that we're all so desperately seeking? It starts with giving, because generosity in every single form it takes. So I'm not only talking about monetary generosity. That is one way that generosity manifests of many, many ways. But generosity is a manifestation of our care for others and a way to put action behind our best intentions, because I really do believe that we all have those good intentions, and there is simply a delta between wanting to do something good for ourselves and for others and actually getting up and doing that thing. So we have about half of our work is the Giving Tuesday Data Commons, and the broad goal of the Data Commons is to understand giving behaviors in their broadest sense. What inspires them? What do they look like? How can we inspire more of them? We have an instrument called Giving Pulse, which is a weekly survey of a representative sample. Right now, it's only in the United States, though we very much hope, funding dependent, that we can roll it out all over the world. It's really the sector's first real-time look at generosity behaviors. And that is really compelling, because as a sector, we've often had to rely on data that is a year, 2 years, even older than that. So the idea that generosity is the answer to this question is really backed by very compelling evidence from this survey and from other reports that we've done as well. We can really clearly trace the transformative power of giving and volunteering. So the research conducted over the past 2 years, how long we've been running this particular survey, reveals something pretty remarkable about people who volunteer. Those who volunteer are significantly more likely to report that they are striving to make their communities a better, more civil place than non-volunteers. So this is not just about good intentions, it's about the bridges that we build when we give our time and our energy to others. Volunteers show a 10 to 20% higher engagement across all kinds of critical community measures. So that includes trust. It includes a sense of belonging, which has come up in this webinar already, and a decrease in depolarizing attitudes, another massive, massive problem of our time. So in a time of this kind of deep social division, volunteering doesn't just help those in need, it helps us. It fundamentally transforms how we perceive and interact with our own communities. So what's particularly fascinating is examining the attitudes that are more prevalent among volunteers. Those who give their time are almost 20% more likely to report that their decision to help others included input from family or community. So our generosity is contagious. When people see us doing something with our values, they are more likely to do them as well. These are not just statistics, right? They tell us something profound about how individuals engage with the world around them. And it all suggests that volunteering is not just an individual act. It's part of a social fabric that stretches across generations and relationships. Volunteers are twice as likely to engage in any form of activism compared to non-volunteers. They're almost twice as likely to participate in in-person activism and to take leadership roles in community initiatives, which is particularly important because I think generosity efforts really benefit. They really reach scale when they're run by leaders. And that's something for nonprofit organizations to think about in this coming era. Another thing that's happened with these surveys is that we see that even people who say they don't volunteer, as they report on their other behaviors, they clearly volunteer. So I think it's time to take the most expansive view possible of volunteering. It doesn't only mean a unit of transaction between a person and a nonprofit. It can be something that happens entirely outside of the system as well. And that's probably the reason that we miss measuring a lot of it. So We see this all the time across the Giving Tuesday Leadership Network. Giving Tuesday is an idea, a project that was really born digitally, but has moved largely offline, although online is the tool that we use to connect and to share ideas. Then our leaders take those ideas and they make them a reality in their own communities. So often a person who participates in Giving Tuesday as a giver goes on to actually lead their own campaigns and networks within the movement. So one of our leaders, one of our favorite and beloved Giving Tuesday leaders is Fola Kemi, who began as a volunteer herself for Giving Tuesday and is now the country leader for Nigeria. She's managing 12 other community leaders across the country to lead their own geographic-based campaigns, just as she did years ago. So I think it's really worth it to think about what is the journey that a volunteer goes on? What is the ladder of engagement? And they might start at one place and end up in a place that is totally different, that has transformed them and the community around them. So, if we're going to be living in a time which is defined not only, I would say, by increasing polarization and fear, but the relentless reporting on that, which makes us think that's all there is, or is in danger of making us think that's all there is, volunteering is an act of solidarity. It's an act of remembering that we do, in fact, owe each other something, and that it feels really good to take care of each other. The data is very powerful in showing us that volunteering is not just about helping others, it's about healing our collective disconnection. And our capacity for connection is our most important resource, especially now. And it's time that we chip away at the barriers between intentions and actions by bringing people together through generosity and through community care, much of that which will take the form of volunteering. So when we give our time, we receive something invaluable in return, and that is a restored sense of our place in our community. And it was mentioned earlier that place, that feeling of being deeply rooted where we are, is incredibly important in the kind of loneliness or the kind of isolation that we might feel. So volunteering reminds us that we're not as removed from others as we think we are. And as such, I would just end by saying volunteering is not a peripheral activity, but an essential social infrastructure. And it's happening all around us. I read a great stat, which is that more Americans actually volunteer than watch football. It just doesn't get as much notice, right? It doesn't trend as much. And I would have absolutely no hesitation in saying that that is true around the globe, again, by the most expansive definition of volunteer. I've seen community care happening in every corner of the globe. So every hour of volunteering is a bridge built. If we think about it that way, then we really have a clear road ahead for really improving the situation that we're in right now. And we know, right, we have seen so much data around this just on this webinar. It's time for us to leverage that knowledge as broadly as we can, as quickly as we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asha. Very, very inspiring and valuable. Thank you for sharing that. And thanks to all of our panelists for staying right on time, which leaves us with ample time for the most important part of the session, which is a chance to have questions and answers and dialogue. So I invite all of the panelists to turn on your videos if you are able. And we'll go through some of the questions in the Q&A. To all of our participants, please add more as we go. We won't be able to get to every question. Not every panelist has to answer every question, and some are directed to specific panelists, but if others have insights to add, please feel free to do so. So let's dive straight in and take a first question, which relates to the connection of place to loneliness, and particularly at a time when there is increasing in different models of working from home as opposed to with other people in a workplace. So if connection to place is important in combating loneliness, and volunteering is very much about building communities of geography as well as identity, needs, etc., what is this? Is important connection, especially as people are working from home and losing workplace connections. Would anyone like to take a first crack at reflecting on that? Feel free to speak right up.
I don't mind having a go. I mean, I think it relates back to what I said about the role of place, whether that's your home, your local neighbourhood, whether it's a place of work or a place of education, but all the places we interact with, we create. We have an opportunity to create a sense of belonging and connection to that place. And clearly volunteers work in, volunteer in some of those places. And a good example is libraries. So there's a project in England that's been funded recently called Libraries Connected. And that project aims to recruit volunteers through a library which is based in a community and brings together people around those volunteers. So whether that's young people and older people who may be in sort of residential care, connecting together through like World Book Day, there was an example of that, and young people in primary schools were taken with a volunteer to residential care homes where then the young people read stories to those older people. So that, did a number of things in that, just that one intervention on that one day, really. It connected an older person and a younger person together. It broke down those divides that were mentioned earlier in terms of different groups. It helps bring a sense of identity and belonging and connection to the community through the libraries. So to me, it's just an essential part. Volunteering is an essential part of all those things. You get volunteering in the workplace as well. So corporate volunteering, which again can connect you to the community, but also bring in your connection to where you work as well. So I'll shut up now and let others contribute.
Thank you, Andrea. Would anyone else like to comment on this question?
I will. I think it's just useful to remember that we've all, well, those of us of a certain age, have worked in offices and probably enjoyed that sometimes, and probably really didn't enjoy it sometimes. And I think loneliness is a tricky thing because it's possible to be lonely in an office full of people. It's possible to be lonely in a crowd, right? And it's possible not to be lonely when you are actually physically completely alone. So when people conflate those things as if being around other people is automatically meaning that you won't be lonely, it takes real intention, even in a virtual workplace and in an in-person workplace, to create a culture of belonging and inclusion, and where people feel that there's a real sense of camaraderie when they come to work every day, whether that's going into a physical office or turning on their computer.
Thank you, Asha.
I agree completely with that.
Let's move on to another question directed to Andrea, but others, please feel free to chime in as well if you have insights. And it's a question about return on investment. And have you also done any scientific research that provides facts and figures that investment in volunteering is a good return on investment for combating loneliness? So
it's not a straightforward answer, I'm afraid. One of the main issues in loneliness research and in evaluations of interventions, it's not done in a consistent and robust way. So we don't have a really good evidence base, despite years of research around loneliness and interventions. When we look at the interventions and the evaluations that have taken place, it's not easy to the first point is it's not easy to compare the evaluations to say, okay, this one works better than this for these various reasons, or we don't know which interventions work best for which groups either. The second point is that the measures that we've currently got of loneliness, there are a few scales around. So the UCLA and the de Jong-Javeld scales of loneliness are two notable ones. Are questionable in terms of their ability to measure change over time. So they might be good at looking at the population at any one point in time, but they weren't designed to measure a change linked to an intervention. So because of those scientific issues about the robustness of services, of evaluations and the measures, it's then the knock-on effect is it's very difficult then to start getting data to show and demonstrate the return on investment. But I think it's vitally important, and it is something that we're working towards, not just in terms of volunteering, but in terms of loneliness services more generally. Now, others on the call may well, because they're more involved specifically in volunteering, may know of something that I'm not aware of.
Thank you, Andrea. Would anyone else like to add to this issue about addressing the metrics?
I can only say we didn't do metrics. There was no time. The project lasted for a few years. But what we did, we tried to collect stories from people who have been involved. Some of the stories you can see, our colleague Stuart for Volunteer Ireland was kind enough to share all the resources that we have collected through the project. But there is a power in people's stories. So we try to collect stories and listen to stories and the experience they had. And there's so many wisdom in it. You can see, then you can really spot what that meant to them to become meaningfully reconnected or connected in the community through some of the activities that we did in the community.
Thank you, Lejla.
That is one of the issues. So you know, because loneliness is a subjective issue, you know, an ideal way is to collect stories and narratives and to get people's perceptions of it, but that is then difficult to quantify from a metrics point of view, and we need to then link up things like maybe increased use of, you know, like I was talking earlier about increased use of GP services or reduced use or whatever it might be. And so there's this tension really between the desire for rigorous evaluative studies and the nature of loneliness and the way in which we talk about it and articulate it, which is a more qualitative way around discussions. So I think there are some of the tensions in this whole field of study really.
Thank you, Andrea. And I'll point to there's some resources that our participants are sharing in the chat on recent research related to the value in regular volunteering and well-being for you to click on and save as you wish. Like to go to the next question. What are the socioeconomic consequences of loneliness among youth and young children? And how can these be addressed in simple ways through volunteering? Not a softball question. Who wants to take it?
I'll take it.
I was going to say, I don't want to speak too much. You start.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. We have I'm not an expert in the subject, but we do have a youth engagement network as part of our global community. And I mean, from my perspective, it's the same answer, right? Kids know what they believe in. They exhibit incredible leadership qualities when it comes to generosity at a very young age. So our youth engagement program is entirely youth-led. It's what they want to do, what they believe in, and we're there to connect and support them. But I think whether it's youth or whether it's adults, the real power is in the collective, right? The power is in not just doing generous things, but doing them with other people. And young people actually have the jump on that. They know always, right? What are the latest ways to build those networks? And if they're networks that are built around giving and volunteering, then they're very meaningful.
And I think I was just going to tackle the first part of the question. So we've done it in reverse order, but just in terms of thinking about the consequences of youth loneliness, which, you know, as well as this sort of the mental and physical health issues that I spoke about earlier, but we know that young people are less likely to do well at school, they're less likely to engage in the studies. That then can have a knock-on effect in terms of their confidence levels and self-esteem. And then obviously that leads to bigger divides and inequalities in society and can have a knock-on effect in terms of their employment prospects in the future. So just thinking about the wider socioeconomic links there. And then I think, of course, as was just mentioned, you know, volunteering is for all age groups, and everyone can benefit, including young people. And there's some really good examples of befriending amongst young people as well, where either young people can support older people or can support other young people who may be isolated and lonely through things like disability or health conditions as well.
I just want to add that, like, FRIES is also partnering a program like dealing with the youth and loneliness, and like I think our experience is that you have to differ between like loneliness and severe loneliness. Like, you know, I think in Denmark, a lot of NGOs, including myself, has been saying like, well, to combat loneliness, you need to volunteer. But a lot of these people, like when they are severe lonely or chronic lonely, well, maybe joining a volunteer activity is just not enough. It's a very, very difficult step to take. And we've had some success in we have a program who's functioning at some high schools, that they are making peer groups. They're making groups, these people that are feeling severe lonely, and talk about their, you know, their isolation between each other. And that helps. It's just, I just want to state that volunteering might be the easy answer, but sometimes it's that's a long road to go there.
Yeah, and I think it links back to my point that I made earlier, that, you know, if you think about chronic loneliness, which is what you're talking about, where you're lonely often all the time, we know that there are neurological changes that take place when you get chronically lonely. You perceive yourself as in a more negative light. You perceive other people's interaction with you in a more negative light. So that then has a knock-on effect in terms of confidence, ability, and willingness to get involved in activities or even leave the house, for example. So, or, you know, if you see a passerby, you might look away, you might not want to communicate with them. So I think all of these interventions, services, whatever we might want to call them, need to be flexible in the design and tailored for the individual. And it might be that some people who are very chronically lonely, young people or old people, may well need individual support and psychological support in the first instance to get them to a position where they feel confident to volunteer.
Thank you. Because we're talking about young people and old people, there's a number of questions and comments that have come in, and an example that somebody pasted in the chat about a Suitcases of My Life project, which is connecting younger and older people. A question in the chat earlier about how we use language to work with older citizens. Do you use social media versus print media? And then a question related to working with older volunteers, retirees who are sent abroad for short-term mandates. How can we frame combating loneliness through volunteer efforts to better attract volunteers to join us without causing offense? How would you frame addressing loneliness to older volunteers? So maybe any sort of comments about perhaps a unique opportunity to engage the two populations that are most affected through creative programs connecting the two related to loneliness.
I can maybe just give a few sentences on that. In my organization, we also have a lot of intergenerational programs. It is important. It's not just for loneliness, even though it's a very pressing issue, but the intergenerational gap is wider and wider. And it's because all of the different trends, including digital, you know, this digital space and the speed that new generations are in that going in that digital world, and so that gap needs also to be addressed. And the way the younger generations and older generations communicate, it is very different. And loneliness is also somewhere there embedded in all of these issues and trends around us. I just want to add that, I mean, tackling loneliness, it's really not there is no simple answer. And volunteering is just one of them. There are so many different social phenomena that are, I think, either supporting or not addressing loneliness in a proper way. We live in times of angry politics and uncertainty, and it's hard. Many people just feel lonely, left alone with their problems. That is also one component of feeling lonely and powerless. And I think in that context, volunteering and civil society, all these networks can help a lot, can help send a message that people are not alone with their problems and challenges and hopes. Sometimes feeling lonely with your hopes is also something that is not a feeling that you want to live with. You need somebody to share your hope with and to take a collaborative action. And I think this is the space where civil society can offer, and volunteers and volunteer networks can offer the most benefit. And maybe just to end, I'm saying this very often, and I'm going to repeat it. I mean, volunteering is always an encounter between people and nature, or between people and problems and challenges and potentials in their community. So that is why I think it's important in terms of coming back to the meaningful contacts where there is an opportunity. It's not always a cure, but it's a great opportunity for people to be reconnected.
Thank you, Lejla. Casper?
Just a quick reflection about what Lejla said about like the world situation and the angry policy, or what you called it. I just read a Swedish survey last week stating that up like 90% of the youth would like to engage in something due to the frustration and the environment about war and whatever. But 14% of them, only 14% of them knew where to find an opportunity to engage. So I think like the network like IAVE all over globally has a huge job in showing the communities like what people can do, where can you go, where can you volunteer. We have to keep on emphasizing our role as someone that can have this overview, because there's so many people who would like to do something, but they don't know where to go. Just a quick reflection.
Thank you, Casper. And let me go to you, Andrea, in 1 second. Just let me comment. I think there's a number of questions and comments related to examples from the Global South. And because of many of our panelists today, I've been providing examples from the North, a suggestion to hold a similar webinar focused on Global South practitioners. I think it's a great idea that we'll certainly take under consideration, and also just inviting people to join and participate in IAVE and other global volunteering networks is precisely about finding ways to cross-pollinate, to instill the spirit of volunteerism in countries around the world. And IAVE has the global network of volunteer leaders that is entirely a Global South network. Please, if you aren't already connected, join, and certainly many of the other webinars in our various series have different geographic foci, but the point is to provide perspectives from different parts of the world that may be adaptable to other parts as well. Andrea, did you have a comment on this particular?
Just in that, about that question about language and intergenerational activities and bringing older and younger people together. So I mentioned an example in my presentation about art-based activities in museums. There's another really good project in England, not far from me, in Manchester, where it's based around intergenerational music making, which again is getting young people and older people together around writing songs, participating in music. And I think there's clearly a common theme here, that the way that we connect people together, whether it's different generations or different groups who don't normally connect, is around having a like-minded people together around activities that can bring those people together, whatever that might be. It could be sport, it could be walking, it could be music, but it's having that that as the language that connects people together, that commonality. And then just briefly, we could debate for quite a long time about the role of technology and AI and virtual reality and social media, because it obviously plays an influential role in loneliness. And like somebody mentioned earlier, there is a two-way link. It can have a really positive benefit in instantaneously connecting, but it can also have a damaging effect as well. And I think how we need to see technology is that it's a tool for connecting people either together or to places. And maybe in terms of volunteering, it may be useful to connect volunteers with the users of the volunteer services, for example, but possibly it has some limits as well in terms of what it can do.
Thank you, Andrea. You're anticipating the next question, which is specifically kind of how can artificial intelligence and new technologies help fight loneliness through volunteering? Do you think these new technologies are useful or not? And in what ways? I think you started to address it, and it's almost impossible to have any sort of event or webinar without talking about artificial intelligence these days. So here's your moment, folks. How can AI contribute to, in a helpful or unhelpful way, to what we're talking about today?
I don't know if I have much more to say, so I think I've done my bit of contribution to that without realizing. Sorry.
Well, I think AI is going to present us with all kinds of challenges and opportunities we can't even foresee right now. And I think there's really obvious things like asking AI to present you with local volunteer opportunities, and it becomes easier to follow through given that. And I'm sure there's a million other innovative ways that it can feed into this space. I would just say that at the end of the day, AI will never share a vision for a greater world with you. And at the end of the day, you have to get up and put one foot in front of the other. And AI, at least in the foreseeable future, can't do that for you either. So AI can be a wonderful tool, but I think that the idea of civic participation is that you have to participate, and that cannot only be done through technology. It really does involve taking a little bit of leadership and just doing something, joining something, trying to help in one small way and letting it build from there. So AI might be able to guide you toward that initial step, but you still have to take it.
I would like just to add that, of course, if it brings added value, then, and it can, and it does already, then I think it is beneficial. It can help us do things, I mean, faster, in many ways better. But there are also a lot of challenges and ethical issues. And I think first, it is really important for us to acknowledge that it's here, and how to deal with that. We at European Network, CV, we have developed a policy paper on AI and the challenges we have, but also at the opportunities. So it's there for all of us to think, and as long as we know and consciously follow, I think, the development of AI, it can help us even in these programs. But it cannot exchange the human idea and desire to change or to scale on a higher value system.
Thank you, Lejla. We're coming we've got time for a few more questions towards the end of this very rich dialogue. There's certainly one that was touched a little bit on in one of our conversations earlier, but someone who's curious about the potential risks of pathologizing community involvement, particularly when volunteering is formally prescribed through processes like social prescribing. How do we ensure we are not codifying loneliness as an issue that needs to be, quote unquote, fixed with and through volunteering, and what might be some unintended consequences of this approach? In other words, could codifying these responses risk reducing complex social needs into transactional acts of care? And I know, Lejla, you had talked a little bit about that in one of your responses earlier, but let's, maybe perhaps expand on that here. You want to get us kicked off, Lejla?
Okay. I think it's very important not to address people as victims of loneliness. I think Casper can say more about that, because we have collected a few stories of people who wouldn't be involved as a victims of loneliness. So, but it goes same with the, other different social inclusion policies and programs. We don't want to, isolate people, addressing them separately. We want to somehow address them in a way for them to become an equal part of the community.
I think in a Danish perspective, we like globally, we all suffered from this, COVID. And during COVID, I think it became easier for everyone to talk about loneliness. Like we had friends, children, family, relatives who actually saying loud that they felt lonely. So we are actually we try to address loneliness as something that you can talk about and not being afraid of talking about, because everyone, not everyone, but most of us, knew one or had the feeling during COVID. So I think there was a shift there in our communication.
Thank you, Casper. Any other thoughts on this issue? Well, I want to really thank everybody for such engaging questions, for your engaging presentations, to all of our panelists, a virtual round of applause for the time you put into this field and to summarizing it for all of us, and to the couple hundred people who have been engaging with very thoughtful comments and questions in the chat and during our Q&A session. This is a conversation starter, and we hope to be able to continue this. Again, we're approaching an important International Year of Volunteers in 2026. There's a dialogue ongoing and regionally that IAVE and other global convening organizations are convening around how volunteering can be best positioned moving forward, given how important we know it is to combating loneliness and to doing so many other things in the world. So please see the QR code on the screen if you'd like to take the survey, whether it's related to the issue we've been discussing today or other thoughts you have about leveraging this moment to talk about the importance of volunteering as we approach this UN declared International Year of Volunteers next year in 2026. Please again, do join IAVE, sign up so that you can get information about webinars like this if you haven't already. And I'd just like to thank once again Lejla, Asha, Andrea, Casper for the time that you put into this webinar and for all the time that you have taken engaging these issues. So a big round of applause.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Great. Have a wonderful evening, afternoon, morning, or whatever time of day it may be to all of you.